And welcome to the Outcast Intellectual Podcast, which has definitely been on time for the last 3 weeks.
I was on time, so I'm gonna.
You were, yeah. Yeah, two weeks ago was not my fault because that was when we were in Florida, and then last
Yeah.
week
Oh yeah.
my fault because I don't know, had lots of work to do. So,
Fair.
but yeah, it's funny that like we have had like so many conversations on our co-working call that would have fit perfectly with this. And then it was like, oh, like this is at least we know that the co-working or the podcast episode won't be boring. It's like, yeah, no, there we go.
Don't jinx it, man. Like that's not.
Yeah, no, I believe in our ability to continue talking.
Yeah, you and I for sure. If anyone doesn't know me or Isaac super well, I think we could both like successfully talk to a tree for a few hours. So.
I mean, trees are such good listeners.
They really are. Yeah.
In case someone is somehow familiar with me and not with Krislyn, because most of the friends we have on Facebook are pretty much the same people.
Fair.
Krislyn is also a copywriter and actually knows psychology, which I'd like to think I know some of it by my own study, but I didn't actually go to school for it. So we have someone who's actually trained.
I'm gonna let you in a secret. Most of the things that I learned in like all my very expensive, very long years of going to school is stuff that you can find on YouTube. So, or the internet. That is the honest truth. That's a lot of how I did my studying, was finding like really good YouTube channels and being like, oh yeah, explain it to me another way again and again. So you probably have much more knowledge than you do. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, I read the textbooks because people would take them to like thrift stores and just be like, oh, it cost me $300 for this textbook. I guess I'll just throw it out because I'm done with it. Like, thank you. I would highly enjoy getting this book for $5.
Yeah, or there's a new edition, so they can't sell it back anymore. Mm-hmm. Which the new edition means that there's like 3 pages of new information. And so that book is deemed like useless now, which is
it's not
infuriating.
Not like I'm reading like the version that still thought that like homosexuality was a mental illness.
No, that does, depending on how far back you go, like that does exist, right. Which is a bummer. But that's like, you and I have talked about this before, and like I know nobody has the context of our prior information or our prior conversations on this podcast, but like we've talked a lot about what a disorder is and like what an illness is and how people come to those conclusions to say those things. So like we know homosexuality is not an illness or a disease, but like at that time they genuinely did believe that because there was so much misinformation and like ingrained biases, and it was just thought of as fact. So they're like, we're going to write a medical textbook, the diagnostic manual of statistical whatever, I forget what DSM stands for. That's how good of a psychologist I am. But essentially, yeah, we're going to say that this is a mental illness. So if you think about that and you think about some of the mental illnesses we have right now,
just saying that's and you know this, but it doesn't necessarily mean everybody else knows this, but that's a big reason why I'm not a huge fan of what I call popular psychology, because obviously it's not like every single finding rather of the founding of psychology, rather, which has findings. Like it's not like I disagree with every single one of them, but there's so many things that are put forward by it and that a lot of people believe because they just hear something being said, that I'm just like, dude, at the end of the day, these are just a bunch of friggin' people who went to college and started doing experiments, and people still fuck up. But like your average person is just like, oh, it's a doctor. Oh, it's a psychologist. Like, no, it's a fucking person that has an education. Like, that doesn't mean never listen to them, but it doesn't mean that they always know what the fuck they're talking about anyway, because it's like there was a time when people thought, oh, the person's crazy. We'll just dip them in cold water and scare the crazy out of them. Like they literally thought that.
that woman's hysterical. We're just gonna give her some cocaine and a vibrator, and that'll fix it. Like, we're good. No, you're 1,000,000% right on a lot of that. And as someone who went to a bunch of school and did all the things, I do agree with you. I think one thing that I appreciate a lot about like the world of academia and like how we're trying to figure out the world around us and like make sense of it is like peer-reviewed journals are amazing, and I love the concept of them because it's like, okay, so you have this like idea of armchair experts, and like Wikipedia is a great example of this. It's most of the time Wikipedia is like pretty reliable. It lists sources that you can connect to get quick information about a subject, any fucking subject you want. And like generally it's like pretty good information. However, any fucking person on any given day can go in and fuck shit up. And if it's not caught, someone can look at that Wikipedia page and be like, oh, did you know that mushrooms are actually also made of leprechaun? I don't fucking know. You know what I mean? Like they
could be. Maybe we just properly measure them.
Fair.
Starting it here.
Anybody can put anything in a Wikipedia page is my point. So like if you, especially if you had an agenda and wanted to edit things in there, fucking game over. You can. But the cool thing about the peer-reviewed journals is what they're saying is like, we all went through this course of study, all of us. We all agree to these ethics, which I think is another thing that we don't, that should be more universally like understood. Like I feel like every profession should have a set of ethics. That's a personal thought. But like in psychology, at least, there is an understood set of ethics that everybody follows. So like we're all on board with that. And then you have to get your shit that you want to put out into the world looked at by numerous people that are experts in your field specifically, not just like, well, I look at ADHD, so I'm gonna check out this article somebody wrote on emotional disturbance or something. Because that wouldn't be congruent, that you're not a fucking expert in that. Why do I care about your opinion in it if you're just some random dude? So like the whole point is like experts helping experts to not put out things that don't make sense or don't, you know, have any true add any true value to like the field. Where it gets fucked up, and I'm sure this will come as a surprise to no one, is that it's not hard to understand like the statistics of the studies to show when they're like, oh, this is a big deal, or oh, this didn't really show anything. But the media will take this shit as soon as the study is like found, like posted somewhere, published. They'll take this much of like what's being said in it and be like, did you know Mozart, if you play Mozart for your baby, its brain will grow 40 times its size in like 3 days. Like that's a really good example of the media taking like an actual study that was like peer reviewed and looked at, and the actual outcome of the study was like found to be not super significant. Like there wasn't a big relationship between playing classical music for your baby and like your baby being smarter. But the media was like, we like the sound of this, and we would like baby Mozart to be a product that exists. So we're just going to tell everyone that if you play classical music for your kid, they'll be smarter. Well, so anyway,
then like to even think that like it just shows so many like people's lack of understanding, because like you think of it as like just playing classical music, but like you need to go through so many different variations of that study to have like an actual understanding. And this is from someone who fucking has no interest in studies. I have no problem. I had no problem writing papers, and I have no problem writing copy, but I hated research papers because my attitude was always, oh, great, look, here are all the reasons that I'm right. Guess what? There's somebody who thinks the complete opposite, and they have blog articles and shit like that too. And yes, people like on the, you know, the academic things as well. Like there's some weird ass friggin' things on there.
Oh, totally.
You don't know if you're searching for your shit for like 13 hours trying to find a good link. And that says the other side is right. So it's like, well, then who cares? Like if you can bring someone who has patches on their elbows to say that you're right, well, so can I. And it's like, okay, so we spent all this time jerking around trying to find these different links just to see that everybody can say that they're right anyway. Ooh, big surprise, you know?
I think that's a super good point, because another thing that people don't recognize is one fucking time that someone did one thing and wrote about it is like, really? Like, are we really going to be like, yeah, that means it's true? Like, no one, when you use your logical brain, no one would ever think that. No one would ever think if we didn't experiment one fucking time with one group of people, no matter how good we thought we picked out these people to be in the study, if you can't recreate it, that it means nothing. To me, it means very little.
Well, it's the whole point of it, isn't it? Is that you're
Yeah,
supposed to be able to test it and prove it over and over under those circumstances.
it doesn't mean it happens. So
Right.
you're right. That so like the hallmark of like a good study is that it should be written in a way that anyone could reproduce it, right? If you had the materials and the time and the access to the things that the original researchers had. But you should be writing this paper, which is why so many of them are like so dense and hard to read and nobody wants to fucking read them. But you should be able to write it to be replicable. No, that's not a word. To be able to be replicated.
It might be. It might be a.
I don't think I've ever heard that word used in a sentence. Replicable?
Oh. Yeah, able to be copied or reproduced exactly. I don't know like the right way of saying it, but yeah, like
replicable.
Yeah,
that's better. Replicable.
Intelligent people. We had to figure that out, but it's okay.
Welcome to the intellectual outcasts, where we're learning how to say words.
Bow down and worship our intellectual superiority.
We're gonna teach you something today, and it's gonna be how to say the word. How was it? Replicable.
Replicable.
Replicable. And we're gonna teach you how to not say that word.
I think the thing with the studies too with me is that ultimately, if you're going to do anything extensive or prolonged, scientists and doctors and the like, whatever it is, are generally like they need somebody to pay for that, don't they? They need the grant or they need the funding coming from somewhere. And who has the most vested interest, either the government or a given pharmaceutical company in the case of, psychiatrics and stuff like that, maybe even in the case of some psychological studies, I don't know. But the point is that whenever money is there, and like you said before, like the business of mental health, that would have been like a great idea for the name of the, well, I can always do that for the YouTube episode, but is that where there's money, there's a conflict of interest. And that is another reason why I don't have the highest opinion of, again, like I say, popular psychology, because, and I've said this in our calls before, when you're like, like my professional opinion, the problem is that it's impossible for somebody to have just a professional opinion, because the entirety of their opinion is informed by their life experiences, which is necessarily going to vary. And when it comes to studies, it doesn't matter how intelligent somebody is. There are times when the study is made specifically for a given purpose, and it is not to test a hypothesis. It's just to seem like it's testing a hypothesis so they can say this was true, like they were always trying to say from the beginning.
I mean, you're supposed to disclose any affiliations in a study. I think there are ways to get around that, and I would love to be optimistic enough to believe that none of that kind of shady shit is happening and that everyone's disclosing when they need to. But again, even if someone discloses in an article that there is a conflict of interest or they're being funded by like Pfizer or something, and the study is about how a drug impacts a condition, right? How does this new antidepressant work for major depressive disorder? Whatever. Again, most people still aren't going to the actual studies. And I'm guilty of this too, as someone who, like, I don't know, has read a lot of studies, where you'll see something and it will have links to the studies, but like that's kind of where your brain goes, oh, this is reputable, like I can trust the source.
Right.
So you know what I mean? There, and your brain is always looking for shortcuts to optimize and like be more efficient, right? So if you're like
contract, and then you're like, oh yeah, sure, down all the way down, agree and continue.
Exactly. Great example. I've never fucking once in my life read one of those. I should. I never have.
I think because everybody's like, oh, here, let's like just do this and we'll continue with the process. Like, okay, well, this is like long as shit. I'm not gonna dun 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 dun. I can't continue doing the theme because it's eventually going on YouTube and they'll claim it, but you know.
Oh Jesus. Well, not to mention, like, think of if you read every one of those, how much of your life would be gone from you forever? Like,
And for no good reason too.
for
'Cause, I
no
mean,
good
you
reason.
know,
Yeah. They're gonna do what they want with your shit anyway. And what are you gonna be like? I actually do disagree with these, so I'm not gonna go continue to do whatever I was trying to do.
yeah.
Like,
I'm not going to use Windows. I'm not going to use
yeah,
Mac.
right,
Like, nope,
right.
nope. It's strictly Linux for me from now on. It's like, okay.
Gonna go back to Netscape Navigator. Like,
You've got mail. Go back to
yeah,
AOL
yeah.
Instant Messenger. Oh man, that's probably still out there too. I don't know
What?
if I'm gonna AOL Instant Messenger.
Oh, totally. Not a couple years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I tried to download it for like nostalgic purposes and like signed into my old screen name, but no idea what my password when I was 16 would be. And for the record, if anyone doesn't know how old I am, it's because you never will. So it was it was a while ago. But yeah, first of all, when I tried to log into it, it did not give me the same like feelings of
We
the
we collectively went down a rabbit hole. I don't know why I even thought of that because we're
I
so
don't know.
talking normally, but it's okay. We got ourselves. But yes, AOL Instant Messenger. Most people who are watching this will be able to relate. To be like, oh yeah, no, it's okay. You know.
In your sick screen name that you came up with when you were 14.
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
Yeah. I know we're on a tangent, but I did know a kid whose screen name was Bike to Relax, the letter 2. And I will never forget it for the rest of my life because I thought it was so lame. But as like a grown-up, I don't think it's lame. As a 14-year-old, I did.
I don't even remember what mine were anymore. But it doesn't matter. And to get it back on track, I guess. When it comes to, you know, like there's like the conflict of interest and also how people's lives inform like where they're coming from with it. I guess to bring it back to that disorder element, because we've talked about it before, but it's going to be useful for the, you know, the episode for it, is that where I come from with it is that like well, you probably know the technical definition of what a disorder would be compared to like what is the official definition of what it
So
is.
I think it varies a little bit, but like if I had to give you what I have summarized to be like a true disorder, it's when something is interfering with your ability to live your life anymore. So I was talking to a friend yesterday about OCD, and a lot of people will be like, "Oh my God, I have OCD," or like something similar. Right.
Right now. It's like,
Right.
okay.
And it's like, well, when does it go from being something that's like, you know, you really like to have all your shampoo bottles lined up in the shower to an actual disorder? And so the long boring answer is like each disorder has its own set of qualifying criteria, right? And they each have a different number of qualifying criteria and whatever. But I think the short answer that's more of like an umbrella answer is that if it's interfering with your ability to live your life in what you would consider to be like a typical or normal way, now you're looking at something that can be classified as a disorder. So if your anxiety is interfering with your ability to do your job, or like go buy your groceries to feed yourself, or like you can't even order your Uber Eats because like actually, I don't know if Uber Eats is a phone call, but like you can't even like call the place to like order your takeout. Now you're like, oh, okay, like
Gotcha.
So I think that's, or like, for example, like if you started to develop a panic disorder and you couldn't drive your car anymore, and now you're like, oh shit, now I can't drive my car and get to work.
So
I think that's where it crosses the line.
I guess in that and where that ultimately comes from, and kind of the necessary like flexible vagueness it needs to, I guess, be able to adapt is also kind of its weakness. Because I mean, the thing about it, like a disorder, is like if you think about it, can we really say that the vast majority of people on the planet don't have something from their lives that is holding them back from living how they want? And like I don't say that, you know, to be like that person. It's just true. Like we know and I mean, you probably have experienced this more recently since you got into copywriting more recently, like when it comes to the mindset stuff and whatever, like that when you understand that there are certain things that people just thought were just, oh, like you either have this or you have that or whatever, but then you realize like, no, it's just the thing called neuroplasticity. You just need to change your attitude and it will change this and that as well. Uh, just the fact that people talk about disorders is like, oh, like this holds them back, or it's like, okay, but like you working at a job that you hate for 15 years wouldn't be something that would be considered a disorder. You know what I
So
mean?
yeah, I do, but I think that's where society comes into play. Like I think that's where we're now talking more cultural, because it's advantageous as a culture for. I mean, like I do think that the American culture is to continue to try to be better, to like live out the American dream, right? And like work hard, and you'll reap the benefits of your hard work. That's like kind of like what society sells us on. But we also are sold on the idea that like being loyal to a company, and this is starting to get challenged by different generations, but like it used to be that being loyal to a company was the way to really build yourself up and to like be successful, and you
Right.
just put your nose to the grindstone, like keep going. um and so I think that and you and I have also previously kind of talked about this. There's like an enmeshment between what is culturally normal or expected, or like the message society is like giving us, and how that fits into our mental health and our habits and the way that we approach things, your mindset, if you will, um, and then how that can lead to disorders, or how disorders fit into that also. And we've talked before about like how disorders fit to society, and if they would even be disorders if it wasn't for how society is structured.
Right.
Um,
And if society
so
encourages them, can you consider them a disorder in a natural sense, in given that society wants them to be there? Because then you go from like this is something that you don't want to this is something that society is encouraging in you, so that I don't know, so that they have enough workers to do all these different things. Where
yeah,
does the individual awareness and consciousness come into play there? Because since most people are largely just a reflection of the culture that they grow up in, which is why, after, for example, like 9/11, like so many people just thought, oh yeah, like every Middle Eastern person could just die, because that was how like how stupid and like focused on that some people were. And like I ran into someone like that even when it was like, I think it was like 2011 or something like that, like even like years after the initial thing. And uh, that is part of the thing, is that it goes back to, for example, I forget what the exact thing was, but like kill someone at home and you're a criminal, kill them at war and you're a hero.
hmm,
the
yeah,
the fact that society looks at what we do differently depending on those circumstances. I mean, yes, if you go around trying to find people to kill, it is different from killing someone who breaks into your home and tries to kill your child. Like, the motivations are somewhat different, but at the end of the day, even just the how we examine that morally and so on, like, I mean, that gets more into the whole ethics thing, but like, does it really matter? Because you still killed someone. And so if you're getting into the
yeah.
notion of like, oh, like this is an absolute truth, which is something that psychology kind of has to do, because it's saying, no, like this isn't about perspective. This is about biology,
That
basically.
is the goal, right? Is to
You
be
know?
able to have it be
Yeah.
objective as possible.
But
Um, but you're right. Like
how
there are
can
too
it
many
be?
assumptions made. Yeah. I think you bring up a really good point with like, when is killing someone else murder and when is it fighting for your country? And this is like, I do feel like this is a very controversial subject, because
That's
part of American society is that you support your fucking troops. And, you know, those men and women have fought for our country, for you to be free. And like, we know what the messaging is on that. And I'm not
right.
saying it's right, wrong, or anything, but I am
Right.
saying like, so now there's layers of society also, and like how do you fit into the layers, right? So like a lot of American culture is religious. If you go to any of the Bible Belt, you'll recognize that immediately.
Judeo-Christian.
So if your 10 commandments are telling you thou shalt not kill, but
I mean,
then
they have been
also
listening to that since the fucking beginning of all that shit, though. Thou
yeah, but
shalt
like
not
so
kill until that someone else is standing on thy rock, which I think is important enough that thou shall kill hundreds upon thousands of others.
and like aren't there Bible stories of like actual instructions to like kill people in the Bible? Like there's a
Yeah,
lot of
the dude who was gonna have to kill his son just to show
yeah,
that
Cain and
he
Abel.
listened to God. It's like, oh no, 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 like it's okay. Like I just want to see if you would do it. Like you know what I mean? Like
Yes. And also any holy war that's ever broken out. But also there's that cognitive dissonance, right? Where like you're holding two beliefs that they don't match up, they're incongruent in your mind at the same time, and you're going, this is fine, everything's fine, this is how I believe in the world. So yeah, that whole aspect of it. But I mean, I like you pointed out, I like to say like on a personal note or on a professional note, like on a personal note, I do think most wars have very little to do with the actual people fighting them. And yeah, so it's messaging, and that's psychology too, is how do we send the message that this is important enough for someone to kill other people and possibly die for.
And
yeah,
then I guess, well, before I forget, I don't know if you are on the Facebook thing at all, but Whitney was in here a little while ago. Well, maybe she's still in here. We can't see like people like participate.
I cannot see anyone, but hi Whitney, if you're still here, we love
Rodrigo's
you.
here too.
Rodrigo, hi, what's
You're
up?
the best people ever. You must be talking about both of you, and I'm here too.
I feel like very loved.
But it also it comes back to the nature of like how the aspect of psychology where ultimately what is okay is generally determined by the vast majority of people. That's kind of how people at the end of the day really measure a lot of that stuff, unless they're very intellectual, in which case like, well, like you're stupid. Like a bunch of people believing the wrong thing doesn't mean that they're right, but most people do think it's like, oh well, you know, this is what we all believe, so this must be true. And when it comes to like the judgment of like what's the right way to kill, what's the right reason to go to war, you know, if you kill someone because you hate them, compared to a politician having somebody assassinated because of any other reason, why is it that they're, you know, like a dirty politician rather than a fucking psycho? Like,
Yeah,
if you even think about that, like that's how people think about it. It's like, oh, you know, oh, he's in the military. It's, well, you know, they have a big decision to make. It's like, okay, so if a politician's decision involves killing somebody, it's just part of their job. But if somebody else decides, you know, like this person, like, you know, this, I don't trust that this person isn't going to like kidnap and like kill my child. Like, then, you know what I mean? So it's like they act like they're matter differences in kind rather than degree, simply because of their experience with that person's choice. And like, for example, even think about it, like if some random person, and I mean, it has to come back to violence because it's me, but if some random person like attacks somebody else, it's like, oh, like they're assaulting them. But if someone who is like a soldier like attacks somebody else, like even in civilian life, yes, they could still get arrested for it, but like it's almost like it's like, oh well, they are a soldier. You know what I mean? So like people like they make it okay, even though it's like, no, it's just a human being. Like it doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah, and I think too, like even how we view what war looks like, what fighting looks like, what our soldiers' responsibilities are versus how we did that 50 years ago, 100 years ago, like those are very different things too, right? Like we're constantly evolving what our beliefs are for certain things. The idea of a major war really doesn't involve as much D-Day style fighting, where we're all gonna just like thousands of people at the same time are gonna run at each other with guns. That's not like the tactics of how we do things anymore. And like obviously there are still incidences where like a soldier is going to like fight someone physically hand to hand.
Right.
But now we have drones. Now we have targeted airstrikes. Now we have different
Cyber
ways
warfare and so on.
yeah, cyber warfare, bio
Yep.
warfare. Is
No,
that
chemical
biological?
warfare is, yeah, I mean, that's technically, it's outlawed by the Geneva Conventions, but I mean, there's still people who use it.
That's cute.
Yeah,
That's
I
real
know.
cute. Yeah.
And that's the funny thing is that, to think of the insanity of that, where it's like, we're gonna like send like gigantic bodies of people against each other to kill each other, but we have rules.
Right.
It's like,
So,
and that is another reason why I am against so many elements of popular psychology, because like I just want to be like, because of the microphone is my webcam, I just want to be like, hey, you're fucking crazy too, idiot, like come on, like, but and yet people still act like, oh, they're over there and we're here. You know what I mean? It's like, no.
Yeah.
No.
I got a spoiler alert for everyone. All of it's made up. Every fucking thing is made up and invented by us. All of it. Psychology, philosophy, fucking botany. It's all made up. Like we came up with the tests. We came up with the way we're going to measure things. Like, yes, we can do it reliably, but like what the fuck is an inch? How long is an inch? Oh, it's how many millimeter? No, if you made that up. We all made all of it up. So when you look at it that way and you really think about it, like somebody got bored one day and was like, you know what we're going to do? The size of this quarter is now the unit of measure, and this is a quarter. And so like, we're all going to measure in quarters from now on. Right. Well, how big is a quarter? It's just this fucking size. So just make a million of these. And that's the unit, like.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the funny thing
yeah.
about it is that everything that we do ultimately is just as good as we can make it so that we can make shit happen. But that's really, what it boils down to.
And when you're talking about psychology, it's the same thing. Like you were just saying earlier that like, it's not objective, like can never be objective. And that's exactly to your point you just said. We try as best as we can to make it most objective that we can. And there are millions of ways in which we miss the mark. No matter how good a study is, or how ethical the person conducting the study is, or how many variables were controlled for, there's always things that are outside of the scope of, because I really don't know that there's many absolutes in life in general. Right.
Because, and we couldn't, and that kind of goes back to philosophy, where is that, how can we even know that we can measure it, even if it is there? Because, and that isn't even just like the limits of the human mind, that's just the limits of our technology too. Like there's a reason why we develop more understandings of things as time goes on, as technology develops. Sure, it's not always based on that, like Einstein, and I think a bunch of different people theorize things before they could prove them with certain measurements, but I mean, there was always, you can't prove it until you can measure it, right? Isn't it the whole damn idea? So like, you can't know that this is the case because you don't know that this is the final measurement you need to be able to do. Like, you just don't know, and nobody's necessarily going to ever know, because in 100 years or 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years, and okay, we'll have killed each other by then, but like
totally,
maybe there would be another friggin' microscope that would see more, who knows? But I'm trying to, yeah, I mean, I think it's, and it comes back to the nature of like where like desirable psychology in quotes comes from versus the undesirable in that regard. Because if you think about it, a lot of the people who are the most successful are also like the most polarizing. And like, for example, like Elon Musk is kind of like it's kind of the cool rich guy. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people like him.
Is he? Okay.
A lot of people like him. It's certainly a lot. I would be willing to say that a greater percentage of people like Elon Musk than like Donald Trump or something. Like there are a lot of people who like him, but I think that Elon like is less of like an ideological element to it. You know what I mean? It's more just like, oh, like he's really smart he earned his money and he's not a douche. Like he'll smoke a freaking, joint on, a cam, like on a show or something like that. Like, oh, like we relate to him. But at the end of the day, like abnormal psychology, and I think we've talked about this before, is the only general way that most people become successful, because the degree of commitment to break through like all that stuff that goes on, like you can't be a normal person and make that happen, because like you're not going to think about it the right way. You're not going to have the emotional, like integrity, or the, just the freaking anti-fragility, that's a word now,
Okay.
to just
I like
be
it.
like, screw it, I'll sleep in my office. This is my home now. You know what I mean? Like most people would not do that.
No, and there's a reason most people wouldn't do that, right? Like, and there's a reason that we have so many things are on a bell curve, right? If you're not familiar with the bell curve, it looks like this. And you've got the tail ends that are both like tiny. And that is, in this case, we can look at like people who are not successful at all and people who are hyper successful, and everybody in the mid, most people, 90, well, actually, if you wanted to talk standard deviations, there's actual numbers, but let's just say that like a solid 75% of people are in this big chunk in the middle.
Okay.
So what are people doing on this tail end where they're super not successful? That is making them an outlier. And then what are people doing on this tail end that makes them ultra successful and an outlier? Well, in any case, it's going to be stuff that the people in the middle aren't fucking doing, right? So maybe on this end of the spectrum, it's drug addiction or certain types of mental illness that are interfering with success in our society, the way it functions. And on this end of the spectrum, it's other behaviors that aren't considered normal, like that they just wouldn't be. And that is, this is much more valued, obviously, because it screams success, but it's also not normal. And I think that is a good distinction.
And I think when it comes to those elements, a big part, and something I mentioned with you before was, and I forget the book that I read it in, but it was that that there are genetic traits that are unlocked by stressors in different situations and so on. Like there are people who, for example, might carry the potential for schizophrenia, but will not express it, and it will not happen with them unless they experience a given level of stress.
Yeah.
But that's also been found to be the case with like people who are like incredibly cool under pressure and so on. Like there are, so the very same extreme circumstances that would lead some to being, the Charles Mansons and so on, were the same things that led to people being like the John D. Rockefellers and so on. And
I mean, are they the same though? Like, what does so you're saying that under certain like circumstances, right, that these things can manifest, but what are the circumstances and are they the same? So are we saying that
level of stress, I would say, is probably like the only way that we can really examine it, because nobody is ever going to live the exact same life as somebody else.
Right. And what's the stress? And so like, this is another, like, these are rhetorical questions, right? You don't know the answer to that. But I think the point too is trauma has been a real hot, I don't want to say it like this to belittle it, but it has been like a real hot button topic lately. Like a lot of people.
Don't worry.
What's that?
I'll belittle it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, you can be the good cop. I'll be the bad cop. I'm used to
Super. But like you do see a lot more people talking about trauma, how they process trauma, that they're just acknowledging their traumas, right? But at the same token, and like go ahead, you
fucking whiners using every excuse they possibly can to get away with things because now society is going to let them do it.
Well, and like you can look at that however you want to. Like I tend not to have, I don't know, I guess I do have a lot of opinions, but I try to keep like an open mind about most things and just like.
Yeah, that's fine.
In any case,
I have no problem confidently stating the opinion I have right now.
Love that. And that's one of the things I appreciate about you.
Thank you.
But so with trauma, one of like the big things, and I would say one of the bigger arguments that you have is, well, why was one event traumatic to one person, but the same event was not traumatic to another person?
Or why would one traumatic event unlock a given thing versus the other, because in both cases it may have the same outcome in the sense of it activates a given gene or personality trait or whatever it is that, you know, where the point of deviation occurs. Like, why does this person react to that differently?
So the only, like, in going to like the studies and the science that I know about this, the only thing that we've really been able to, at least that I know of, that we've been able to sort of figure out is balancing resiliency factors with trauma and like adverse experiences. So the more there's like identified resiliency factors, so that might be having like a really good trusted adult you can go to, or there's like a list of them. I don't have it in front of me, but
Right.
the more resiliency factors that a person has when they experience a traumatic event,
The greater
the
chance
greater
they'll
their,
react positively.
right.
Yeah.
But there are some people that grow up with very few resiliency factors and a lot of like adverse childhood experiences. And then I think what we always forget is that they grow up to be grown-ups, and then they're the grown-ups that we hate.
Right.
As societally, not like as an individual. Maybe you as an individual hate them, but like,
Right.
oh, that homeless guy that smells like piss in the bushes and steals my Amazon packages off my front step.
That
Like,
motherfucker.
that fucking dude. But I'm like, he was a kid once. And what the fuck? Like, I do try to remember that. Even the most hated people, pedophiles. What the fuck creates a pedophile? I'm still like weirdly curious about this. I have no interest in pedophiles, like in a creepy sense, but I am interested in like school shooters, pedophiles. How do these people go from being a normal baby that had a mother and a father? All of us do. Whether or not they hang around is another story, but how do you go from that?
Well, and also how does people's cultural experience affect their perception of a given situation as well? Because it's funny that you mention, like, I'll do the pedophiles thing first, because you can't have school shooters in centuries when there were no guns. But like back in Versailles, I don't remember during what period, but whenever they'd have a party, you know, Versailles in France, for anybody who might not like just naturally know that, because I assume it, and you probably know, but not necessarily everybody will.
That's because he's an intellect.
They would have parties, and they would have the comfort people, and in one box there would be the women, another box there would be the men, and another box there would be kids. In Japan, like 13-year-olds can have sex with like later like teenagers or whatever and stuff. So like the notion of what makes a pedophile, is it that their psychology is different in that sense, or is it that society has this cutoff point? And that's a reason why, like, for example, we think of, well, when are you attracted to kids? Because until recently, I think Japan just changed it. Speaking of Japan, their age for an adult was 20, and they just changed it to 18. So if you were attracted to a 19-year-old, like, I know you're a married woman, but you know, just an example, if you were attracted to a 19-year-old Japanese male, according to Japan, you were attracted to a minor.
Yeah.
But like now, like, if, for example, I was attracted to like an 18-year-old girl, it would be like, you know, dude, like, you're too old for it. It's like, whatever, but like people aren't going to say it's like you're attracted to a kid. You know what I mean? Because it's like, well, and it's funny because girls usually seem to have like a bigger deal with that. It's kind of funny how, again, like your cultural experience informs your psychology. But my point is that society decides that these are things that are okay. So my question is less a matter of, is this and this okay, and more is the reason people find this more reprehensible than anything else. If society had raised us to be different, would we even give a shit?
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I do think that there are degrees to which this subject sort of takes a turn.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's
so like,
hard to like just give this like a
what,
glancing address
right.
without it
Like,
being, it's like, wait, hold on. Like, you know, we're going through a lot of shit. You know, if something doesn't get touched in depth, then it's,
yeah.
you know,
Well, I mean, I will
it's
say
because I'm
like
not Bill
somebody,
Cosby. Okay, continue.
oh, that was good. I will say there's like a big difference between somebody who is addicted to, I don't know if you can hear my cats arguing and killing
I
themselves in the
don't.
background.
But if I did, I wouldn't be upset.
Okay. But there's a difference between did you hear that one?
That was funny, yeah.
So sorry. There's a difference between someone who is attracted to like late teenager
Versus like a freaking baby. Yeah, no. Like
versus a 5-year-old. And
yeah.
and that, again, awful, fucked up, please don't ever, but it exists in our world. And there is a piece of me that wants to know why. And I don't know if it is because it's taboo. And does someone go down a rabbit hole because there's something they get out of a taboo?
Yeah, that's a good
Or
point. Do they even care about the fact that it's a child, or they just care that they're not supposed to?
Or is it something in their brains that's like looking for a specific kind of dopamine that they only get from looking at something that's so taboo, or being a part of something that's so, you know, repulsive to most normal, typical people?
Right.
I don't know. And it's back to like the school shooter thing. We're still trying to understand what makes that happen.
I think a big part of that is also alienation,
Yeah.
because you don't tend to see, like, for example, I don't know if we've ever had a female school shooter.
I don't think we have.
Yeah. And I think that isn't even just about alienation. That's also about like how people tend to like express things. Like one might say that like, and obviously you can't say conclusively, but you might say that like if like a man's pushed to an extreme level of stress, he may act out in violence towards others, or may tend to act towards in violence towards others, versus like a predisposition of like a woman to like just kill herself or something like that. There's way too simple of like
Yeah.
an argument, but there you go. Like the different reasons why people would do this or that, because then you also get into like the cultural element of like why would somebody want to do this to begin with, and not even from like a judgmental standpoint, like, oh, they're so messed up, like why would it's like, no, like why would you desire, why is there this trend? Because now you can say it's like a copycat thing, like they've seen other people do it, so they're going to do it. But then why did Columbine happen, and so on? Like before, like it was like, oh, another school shooting, god darn it. You know what I mean? Like before we kind of got used to them, honestly, in a certain sense. Like,
well, and
why does someone have that idea?
It does seem to the purpose of school shootings and mass shootings in general is I want to harm as many people as I can before I die.
Right. And then I'm going to kill myself, because it doesn't seem
then
like
I'm
many
going
of them. Yeah. Like, and why do they always decide to kill themselves? They're going to die anyway. It's like, it's like, dude, like you have all this ammo, like then get shot by a cop. I don't know. It's like,
Yeah. But like, it's like awful and weirdly fascinating. I do want to know why. I want to know why we're seeing it now. I want to know how much of an influence is the copycat thing, and how we decide to cover these stories, and what this person is looking to gain that they're not getting in their everyday life.
Right.
That they think this is going to give them.
How many of them were medicated to, as a substitute for a real solution?
Yeah. Or just neglected and ignored, or just, I think the most tragic is when you have a mother, I can't remember which, either school shooter or like serial killer, but there was one that the mother came out and like did a documentary on how she had no idea and she just loved her kid, and like then all of a sudden this happened and she was the mother of the serial killer or this school shooter. Can't remember which one, but I'm like, oh my fucking god. Like, I think a lot of people want to blame the parents, which is natural. Parenting has a lot to do with how somebody expresses themselves, and but it's not everything. And I got to tell you, coming from a family with I have a brother, a sister, and a half sister, and I don't think I'm like any of them. Like, we're all so different, and I often wonder, like, how are we all coming out of the same family? This is like insane. But I think I only bring that up to point out that like it's oversimplifying it to be like, well, this kid's a school shooter because his mom didn't love him, or like this guy is a serial killer because his dad beat him, or whatever. Nobody paid attention to him. Like those things can have an impact, but like also we just don't know. We don't know what parts of our society are contributing to weird things like this happening.
Yeah.
And we also, we've said this before to each other, I'm pretty sure, but I do look at the world right now as a big like experiment that is happening, because our technology is evolving so quickly. We don't have any time to know how it impacts us as humans. And like we evolve on like a structural level and like likely on a cognitive level so much slower than the rapid pace at which things are changing and happening and what is normal. Like me staring at this screen for an hour is not fucking normal for a human.
Yeah.
Like if you look at a human,
you still have an organ in your body that used to like help you with digesting something that you never like had to use, or whatever it was. It's like the appendix or whatever it is, you know, like that thing, that the vestigial organ that we don't use anymore. Like we literally have something in our body that just is not like evolved out of us yet.
It's crazy. Yeah. So when you look at that and you're like, gee, I wonder why all these kids are such assholes. Like,
because we're still designed to fucking beat each other to death with clubs, and we're, you know, expecting someone to, you know, live life not having to succumb to any of those desires.
And how would you run an experiment to control for that? How would you run an experiment to be like, okay, we're going to put this group of kids in a caveman setting, or what we think a caveman setting would be, to mimic like where we might be at in actual development. And then we're going to put these kids with like iPads and fucking whatever.
I mean, it is something kind of like that. It was a study called Lord of the Flies, I think, you know, like.
Okay, a little bit different, but honestly, kind of.
It's the same. It's in writing.
Yeah, it's written, so it counts. Yeah, but like very interesting stuff. And it goes back to sort of our original point almost an hour ago, which is these studies can only control for so many things, right? Any science, anything that you see that comes out, you can look at as the best that we can do right now, right? The purpose is for it to evolve. I would love to, like, the day I die, to like be able to press a button where it's like, okay, I know I'm going to die today, but I want one more day 500 years in the future just to see all the stuff we fucked up and didn't get right. I just want to know how it ended up. Yeah, I want to know all the things that like are the equivalent of like using cocaine and vibrators to cure hysteria. That is what I want to know what we're doing.
Yeah, because like we just can't see it because the majority of us can't see it because we're living in the moment of it. I mean, even like the notion of like how, like for so long people thought, oh, like if you just go to church and pray, then you'll be okay. Like imagine us thinking that today. I mean, there are people who do, but I mean, like I don't think the majority of people today, even people who are significantly religious, would find it reasonable that, like, for example, like if you're in a car accident, don't call, you know, 911. Just believe in God and you'll be okay. You know what I mean? Like they'll be like, well, how about we call the ambulance and then go to the chapel at the hospital and pray? Like, you know what I mean?
That sounds like
going to be like a degree of change from, you know, like back in the day. It's like, you know, if you had the nerve to do anything beyond pray, then you're a heretic, you get burned at the stake. It's like, look, I just want to take him to the apothecary. He's bleeding out a lot. I feel like maybe we should stitch this up. It's like, no, God, we'll stitch it up. It's like, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want you to bleed to death, but I also don't want to be burned to death. Okay, you know, and to that point, because I know that we're coming up, like, because we didn't start exactly on time, which is my fault and also very common. But, you know, it reminded me of something that we've talked about before, but I think is really useful for this conversation, which is the nature of why people have this trait or that trait, to take it beyond like what people are willing to consider, because this is something I've mentioned before, and I don't think we disagreed on it intrinsically, but that there is no such thing as good or bad, really. If you think about it, like that's kind of an anthropomorphizing of existence. our emotional experience does not define the objective reality or value or whatever of a situation. And if you can look beyond that, then you can see that there's no such thing as like disorders or like abnormal psychology that benefits you and such like that. It's all just part of evolution in that sense, where that there are some traits that nature selects for in the moment and some that it doesn't. And the reason why people don't want to believe that is because people don't like the notion of randomness. They don't like the notion that randomness applies to us, because then we're just another animal and we're not special. Even though like in our own ways, like, we don't know any other creature that has, our level of awareness and consciousness and so on. Like we don't know of any others. So in a certain sense, we would still be special regardless, but no, like we need to be, like the
Even
biblical
more
special where
yeah.
like, no, there isn't like an almighty creator. It's like, okay, here's everything. And then here's people,
Yeah.
like the people need to feel that level of special. And even if you believe that, whatever, like it's the fact that we have these different characteristics that we know, like some of these things, like I remember reading like the way our eye like developed, like to become an eye so that we can perceive this way is fucked up. Like it's literally like, it's like inside out. It's something like where like if you knew what you were doing, you're not going to put like a clock. If you make a clock, you're not going to make it so that the face looks inside so you can't see what's going on.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
But that's, what I mean? So there's so many elements of our existence that are just, it's just mutation.
Yes.
Agreed. Mutation, evolution, And so even like where anxiety comes in, for example, I know that, you enjoy being super anxious all the time.
So much. It's my favorite pastime. It's just working myself up for no reason.
Before that you've had times where that was way too much to handle. And then there were probably other times when like you were worried about something because of your anxiety. And so you double checked and maybe you did have to do it.
Yeah. There are adaptive features to my maladaptive condition, right? So like the idea of anxiety being something that is natural and life-saving for us as a species, because like, oh shit, tiger, better fucking run. Like right. I would like to continue living today. And I believe one of the reasons anxiety is so rampant right now in the population is because our brains are not fucking meant to live the way that we live. This is a personal opinion. There's just so much going on all the time. But let me tell you something, my anxiety keeps me on top of shit. And a lot of people will be like, oh, you're really well organized. You always meet your deadlines. Like you're like always thinking 2 steps ahead. Yeah, bitch, because my anxiety is going to tell me what catastrophic thing is going to happen if I don't. Like, and the idea of disappointing anyone ever will make me want to hide in a hole for the rest of my life. So it makes me a good worker to be sort of functioning in this way, but it's also like very exhausting. So,
but that's the thing about it is that, is it only a condition because you are aware of having it and you are aware of what it does to you in the process of you having it? Because from the bird's eye view, there is no condition.
Right.
You just have these genetic traits, and either you survive and have a kid, which you guys are planning to do, but
Yeah, I know. Was that a good idea? I don't know. Like,
and that's the thing, is that the universe, and I mean, it's funny because whether you're religious or you're one of my spiritual pals, you're probably not going to agree with this, but this is where I come from right now. The universe doesn't care, because, even if you just think about it, like we're all made of the same shit anyway.
We're all stardust.
So when we die, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't stop existing. It just stops existing in this given shape. And that's the thing, is like people are so emotionally attached to psychology, like we've talked about before. And it is so hard for people to just let go so that it can't hold them back anymore. Let it go.
Everybody wants everyone wants an answer. They want to know, why am I like this? And I think that is one of the reasons psychology is so popular right now, is because, well, there's a lot of fucking reasons why you are like that. but what you want to hear from me is, it is this label, and here's a pamphlet you can read about it,
Right.
and here are some things you can do, and you can tell people you have XYZ, and then they'll understand.
Yeah.
So
here's why it's not your fault.
It is, here's why it's not your fault. And believe me, I'm guilty of this too. Like what you were saying, there are parts of my anxiety that from bird's eye view right now look great. But there were times when it was way worse, and like I couldn't leave my fucking house. I'm like, that is not a helpful way to be like a normal fucking person in the world. Now that I work from home, a little bit different. Maybe things would be different. But right. So like everybody wants an answer. Why am I like this? Why does my brain work like this and yours doesn't? But I think you mentioned at some point on the podcast today that like essentially everyone's a little fucked up in their own way.
I mean, nobody's perfect. You are necessarily imperfect because you're gonna die. Like you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're all fundamentally, imperfect. So what's the point of saying, oh, you have this paint job? It's like, well, you have this paint job. Well, you have that paint job, and you have that paint. It's like, well, your wheel's too small. Well, your windshield isn't thick enough. It's like, who gives a fuck? We're all heading for a crash. It doesn't matter.
as like, what's the word I want? Negative as that is, it's not wrong, and I do think it's a good perspective shift, because who cares? You're a blade of grass in a field. Do whatever the fuck you want.
Oh man, see, you're saying you're a psychologist. Let's talk about that's a little bit philosophical. It's like, man, now you bringing out these freaking, I sound like the nihilist. You bringing out this like poetic kind of,
I mean, it's true, but like there is overlap in psychology and philosophy. There is, and if you don't think there is, I don't know what to say to you. But that is part of finding comfort in this fucked up world that we live in. Which, by the way, I do agree that we live in the most comfortable time that's ever existed to be a human, but it is still very fucked up in a lot of different ways. And at the end of the day, just you really just got to make the best out of it. Whether you have an identified disorder via the DSM-5, or you don't believe in any of that shit, and you do think that God is going to save you from everything, and you don't need to call the ambulance. I don't know who the fuck you are,
or like you don't believe in either of those things. You're just like, look, this is what I want. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And I don't really care about anything else.
Super easier said than done. I will say that, but
not for me. But I mean, it also, again, like everything comes with its own challenges too. So it's like, if you're that person who just believes, oh, like God's going to take care of everything, well, then you don't really need to like overthink things too much if you think about it, because you're just like, well, it's not in my hands. I'm just going to do what I can. If you're honestly, the person who believes in like the disorders, like as being like, like this is everything. Like, no, like, like this is just what I'm stuck with, and this is what I'm going to live with, and I'm going to do the best with what I can. And then if you're, and then it's not like there's only 3 options, but for succinctness sake, if you're on the other end where you're like me, where it's like, I don't give a fuck. I don't fucking care. Don't care. This is what I want. And I don't care what you say. It's like, I don't care what disorder you think I had because you're a fucking idiot. I don't care what disorder you think I had because you hate yourself.
You're a fucking idiot.
Like, it's like, it's just, it's as the world-renowned comedian George Carlin once said, it's all bullshit, folks, and it's bad for you.
On that note, I will say one of my favorite like catchphrases ever is from Whose Line Is It Anyway, when they start the show and they're like, welcome to Whose Line Is It Anyway, where the rules are made up and the points don't matter. I really try to apply that
because that's life.
It's all fucking made up. The points, maybe that's money, maybe that's like you wanted to one up someone, or like go to your high school
family,
reunion with, like your music like whatever the fuck it is, it doesn't matter. Rules are made up and the points don't matter. Yeah,
they're still gonna die, and the stuff you're made up of is never gonna go away. It's like there you go.
Yep. Welcome to this very positive podcast.
I mean, that is kind of the funny thing, and that would be more of a philosophical thing. It's like, is it really negative to say that there is no ultimate, point to stuff? Because then it's kind of like, if you have control over how you respond to things, it's like, like it's really scary at first, but then you just realize like, no, like I can choose who I want to be and how I want to react to things. So it's the same things. Like, if there is no meaning to life, guess what? Now you get to fucking pick what it is for you.
It's a free-for-all party. Go
and
have
once you're
some
gone,
fun. Yeah.
Once you're gone, you just drop the mic and say peace out, bitches.
I love that. That's amazing. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we could go on forever, but
we could. You and I could for sure.
Yeah, it was probably, I guess, a good place to stop it, just because, well, I have stuff to do and you have stuff to do, and
I do. Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like we've somehow managed to have a sense of like a straight line through this. Like, aside from talking about AOL Instant Messenger, I think we did.
We only tangented once. That's like so good for us.
But yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be doing one of. I'll see about trying to do these because I mean, you know this, but I'm going to be in Europe starting today.
Yay.
Well, starting tonight morning, because it would
morning.
Well, because it would be 2:30 a.m. when I get there by our time, but it's 8:30 a.m. by their time.
Future. Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to the future, Chris.
Oh my God, that's so cool. I'm jealous. I want to go to the future.
To the future.
Marty.
Great Scott.
Doc would have been on this podcast. Just saying.
But I'll try to come up with something, and I mean, we can always talk about shit, I'm sure. So like,
yeah,
find another time when we can find something to talk about. I'm sure we'll have such a hard time doing that.
Oh, I know. Well, I've appreciated being a guest on the podcast. This was very fun. I was a little nervous coming on, and then as soon as we started talking, I was like, "Oh no, this is easy. I know how to do this."
It's just like any other time we talk, and then you just forget, it's something that people are watching, complimenting how refreshing that one can examine and question the nature of what is. There's a comment.
No, who made that comment?
You don't know who she is. Her name is Nancy Rosenfelder.
Hey, Nancy.
But just as an oldster, I don't know why I'm reading this, because I don't do female voices. That's why. As an oldster, I have mourned the loss of inquisitiveness and intellect in the majority of younger people. Well done. Oh,
thank you, Nancy. That was very kind. Oh, well, I'll come on anytime. Anytime you want to have me, I'll be here. So
awesome. Well, we'll have to do like a trio one sometime with Rebecca too.
That would be super fun.
We're gonna get like probably nothing done, but it's gonna be fun.
That's right. We like each other. Who cares? You want to watch it? Have fun.
So if you enjoyed this episode, I don't even know if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, because this will eventually be on YouTube. But thank you for watching, and more shenanigans will occur in the future. And remember, I forgot.